present here today about Monorepo. One comment I have is this will be this will be kind of my personal experience I had as I spent kind of almost 2 years working on Monorepo. So I'm going to talk about my impressions that I have, what the benefits I saw while working in a monorepo architecture, and also the challenges that I saw with this one. Because as I see this is the kind of there is no right answer on saying like this is everyone should do it or no one should do it. I don't think it's a straightforward answer. So we should consider in each scenario, is it beneficial for me or not? That's kind of my purpose here. So can everyone see my slide correctly now? My presentation. So a little bit about myself. I'm Eduardo Souza. So I have been working mainly with .NET ever since its earlier days, since 2002. Recently, I have spent almost 2 years working with Scala, which was a completely shift on my work. And it was the same time where I worked in a project using the Monorepo architecture. Also joined AvenueCode on 2015, so I kind of been here for some time. And just as a personal thing, I'm enthusiastic about both functional programming and also about Vim. So that's kind of a quick introduction about myself. So let's go to the next slide. So I'm going to present here what is Monorepo, benefits, one question, does it scale, challenge, and quick tips about getting started with it. So what is Monorepo? So the precise definition which I got was Monorepo is a single repository containing multiple distinct projects with well-defined relationships. What does it mean? Basically, as the name implies, the idea is all the source code that the company have, every project, you're going to be putting in a single repository, kind of Git repository. This might sound scary, like, hey, I have different things. I have project one that doesn't really talk to each other. Do I put them in the same repository? Yes, that's the idea. It's to put everything there. And first comment, Monorepo is not monolith, like in the sense that you're only keeping together the source code. You are not meant to be to have a single binary with everything. That's not Monorepo. Monorepo is about the source control and the references. So what will happen? By having all the code in the same place, everyone will have access to the source code, at least read access. We might talk a little bit more about contributions, how it works like in my scenario. When you have project references, they will be done directly by code. Like usually when you're in a project, in a situations where we have one project reference the other, what we usually do is we build, then we publish our binaries to like Artifactory, and then the other project would reference your library through binary reference on the Artifactory. And the idea on the Monorepo is that you get rid of it. Any reference that you have on the projects, you're going to do it directly project reference. Okay, and then also this usually what you do, you end up managing third-party references within the repository. So like in the instance where in the project that was involved, like for logging, we are using log. It was the Java logging. I forgot the name. Anyway, I think it was SL4J, something like that. But anyway, what they would do is they had a person into the repository where they declare the version of the log4j that was being used, and then everyone was referencing this part of the monorepo. Yes, okay, thank you. And then once they wanted to update the third-party referencing, they would update in a single point on the monorepo, and all the projects would get updated with the new version. And last but not least is, although everything is in a single repository, projects, they can still be built separately, they can be tested separately and deployed separately. So once again, with the idea that monorepo is not monolith. Okay, any questions so far? Yeah, so with that in mind, let's talk about the benefits. What I'm gonna say here is, what I can see the main benefit with monorepo is team integration. Because what happen when you're doing a monorepo? If I do something like I'm changing my project, and what I'm changing impacts someone else's code, I'm gonna have to talk to this person because I'm gonna break that person test, or even I might break the build of this other person. And then when I try to do the and I have a CI properly configured, when I try to post a pull request with the changes I'm making, I'm gonna see that I'm breaking someone else's code. And what happened in the sense, I'm gonna have to go to the team. I'm gonna have to talk to the person to understand, to have an understanding on what the test is doing, on how to solve things. And my pull request, I'm gonna have to send a pull request with my changes and the fixes of everything that I broke along the way. So everyone gets encouraged to understand a little bit about how my consumers are using my code, and also a lot of times when someone else's and the opposite might happen, like um, someone else might have a code that they are working on, and while they are working, they might break your code, and that person will come to you and try to understand how to solve this, and you have to interact with this person. You're gonna probably have to review the code that this person is doing. So that's what I see about monorepo. The main benefit, it really encourages people to talk to each other, to have understand, to really integrate. You know, does that make sense to anyone, to the people here? And also by doing this, also, oh, okay, let me go to the secondary benefits. So now there are other benefits that are usually seen on a monorepo, which is one, if you start using monorepo, you will end up getting a development process standardized with all the teams, because as everyone is working together, I'm referencing other people code directly. We need to have the same building tools, the same tool chain. We have to follow the same development process because we expect the other teams to do code review the same way that I do, because we'll be always reviewing code from other teams, sending code to another team to review when I'm changing their projects. As you have a standardized development process, it also becomes easier for people to move around teams, because the development process will be more well-defined, but also because now I tend to have more knowledge about the surrounding projects with my project. So it becomes a little bit easier if you want to relocate people across teams. Also, with my experience, that happened to me, like when I was working on these with the monorepo architecture, I ended up being borrowed to another team. And although it was a new code base for me, instead, in terms of how we develop things, it was already clear for me because everything was standardized. I know where the source code is. I already knew how the pull requests are expected to be created. The other benefits about atomic commits. What I mean about this, when you're changing something like my project, I'm making a change on my project, but there will be required changes in someone else's project to come along with the changes I'm making. If you're not on monorepo, usually you have some code done, on one place, another related code done in another place that needs to go along together, and you need to synchronize the changes you're doing in the two different repositories. With Monorepo, you have the ability to send everything together in a single commit or in a single pull request. And the last one will be large-scale refactoring, because if you're doing a refactoring, you have everything that you need to work on in a single repository. So it becomes easier, like you won't have a problem like I'm doing a refactoring my code that might create a backward compatibility, and then this will trigger other people to do other refactoring in a later time. When I'm doing a large-scale refactoring, it's still kind of a pain to do, because if your monorepo it's large, there will be a lot of projects impacted. I've seen that happening when I was working on a monorepo, but it's still possible. And like if you have a proper CI configured in a monorepo, if you try to do a large-scale refactoring and you forgot one point, you'll probably be breaking a build or a test somewhere. Okay. Yeah, and now moving forward. I think, okay, I talked a lot about benefits of Monorepo, right? And I bet that the main question that will come to everyone's mind is, does it scale? Because you might think, hey, that sounds a really good idea, but I really doubt that this would work in a huge company. Probably this Monorepo would only be feasible for small things. That's probably, I would bet that would be probably the first questioning that everyone will have about Monorepo. What I can tell you, so in the sense, the CI infrastructure that you're gonna have for when you're using Monorepo, it will be increased. You have a cost there, because like when you're doing a pull request build and checks, you need to run all the tests and build, not only for your project, but also for any project that also referencing yours and that you might have impacted with your changes. So you have a higher requirement for a CI infrastructure. You probably need to have a dedicated team to oversee all this DevOps infrastructure, because it will become a more complex build system, because when you're creating a pull request, what will need to happen? You don't want to build everything because it will consume a lot of time. You want to detect what was that change and what was impacted, what exactly do I need to execute tests, and also this team will be kind of responsible to make standardization on the development process. So you probably need to have a bigger DevOps team if you're doing Monorepo. Also, changes to development process, they are harder to implement, because when you're doing this and you have a large scale team, you're gonna need to do kind of once for everyone. So it might be a little, might need a little more coordination in the sense. And also one thing that you're gonna have, it's wire requirements for engineers' computer, because right, you probably need more space. Sometimes you need more RAM. So when you're talking about scaling, surely in terms of infrastructure requirement, that will be increased. I won't lie about that. However, in my personal experience on the project that I was involved, the repository I was working, it was a 30 gigabytes repository. It was a huge repository, but it was workable. And like, to speed up things, we had binaries cached in a factory, meaning that, like, I have some references. If I'm building my project, if I haven't touched the references I'm making, instead of having my local machine building, the build system, it was able to download a pre-built binaries for that references, so it wouldn't take that long. Also, it was a project like I would guess across 5K engineers. And about access control, some people will say that like when you have a monorepo, everyone will have access. It might become messy, but they had a system in place like on every directory they would have a one file that defined what are the teams that have kind of write access. In the write access, not directly write access, it's more like when I'm creating a pull request, what teams are responsible for reviewing pull requests for that specific directory. And if I was kind of impacting different projects, I would need to go to each team, search to get someone to review that code so it could be committed to the main repository. Also, I have to say that some Git actions, they were getting impacted, like Git status or a Git commit that usually is in almost instantaneously. It would take like from 10 to 30 seconds. So you do have some impacts, but it's not, it's something manageable. It's something that you can do. But probably because of the size of the repository, you need to have kind of a higher, better machine. Like the computer I was using, it was a 1 terabyte of storage, for instance. But it's still possible. If you want to know like big names who is using Monorepo, we have Google, Facebook, Twitter, and Google is actually kind of the main advocate for Monorepo. And they, I don't know numbers, but it said that they had that they have a huge code base and all in Monorepo. So in terms of does it scale, you can see that those big companies, they are using they. I would guess it's more like for this team integration thing that I mentioned. I think it's worth mentioning that like the situation there worked, they had some specific tools that they created to enable all this monorepo. So I would guess that each of them, they do share some tools, like Google has the Bazel build system, Facebook has the Buck, has a system called Buck, Twitter has Pants, and also Microsoft has published some of them, but I would guess there's still some of the tooling that they use that are not fully open sourced. But still, in terms of scaling, like huge companies are also doing, in some level, they are doing some on a repo. So now I'll talk about challenges there, what I see. Okay, I think I missed the the other slide was supposed to come here, not on the zit scale. Sorry, guys. So I talked a little bit about the challenges in the previous slide. Go forward here. But as as I was saying, I think the main challenge, if you want to do monorepo, is cost on infrastructure. You need to have a better infrastructure to be able to accommodate every need in this new scenario. So it's kind of a cost. You need to evaluate. I will have some you have more costs on one front, like I need to have a better infrastructure. I'll probably need to have a dedicated team to manage all this development process. I'll probably need to my engineers, they will need to have better computers. But in the other hand, you have mainly think about the benefits of integration between different different teams. That's what you gain. So that's kind of the scenario that I see. You do a trade-off. Where do you want to go? Do I want to invest in this point? That's the main question that people want to answer. Also, probably you need to think about, will I be able to get all the teams to work in a standardized way? That's also one challenge you might have. And okay, and so getting started, what I would recommend people to go through. So, okay, let's, there's a monorepo. I'm going to read a question here. Does a monorepo help or negatively impact to organize code, I understand that helps. But when a code component saves with the same structure, it impacts someone update part of the code, correct? In terms of organization, so things can be used in a bad way or in a or in a good way. If you want to do monorepo, you need to be organized because you could create bad patterns. You should try to aim for reusing code and also trying to organize things so people know where things are. You know what I mean? And as part of the update, what happened is everything needs to be aware in a monorepo that someone might come to you and say, hey, I'm touching your code, I need you to review it. Okay, because that's what monorepo I see that is about. It's about integrated teams. So the team needs to be aware, hey, you need to play along with the other teams because at the same time that the other teams is going to need your help, there will be eventually you're going to need a help from another team to go through your changes, because with a monorepo you're going to need to synchronize whenever you're changing something. If you impact someone, you need to fix in the same pull request that you're creating. You don't create a you don't do a breaking change and leave that to be addressed later when someone else is consuming. You need to address at that time you're coding. Do you think that answers your question, Marco? Or not? Yeah, okay. So what I was saying is there are some tools available. I think the main ones that I can mention here is Bazel, Buck, and Pent. Personally, I worked with Bazel. I found it very interesting how it works. Because what you do is when you're building, I think all of them will have the same idea. When you're building your project, it will kind of, it's able to detect where you make changes. So it's able to detect whether, if you have the Artifactory configured, for instance, it will be able to detect for each project that we're referencing. Is there any change on this project here? If there is a change, I need to build it. If there is no change, then I can try to download the pre-built binary from Artifactory. Also, running tests, it has some other commands that you can try to inspect on what are the dependencies tree. There are some, those build systems that were created for monorepo, they have these capabilities of detecting what exactly I need to build, what exactly I need to test, what impacts of my codes are kind of, depending on the type of change you make, I might impact only my tests they need to run, but in other scenario, they might need to run tests from other projects as well. So those build systems, they are often capable of detecting this. So also one reference, you can try this monorepo.tools to see some other information. But the monorepo is not kind of a closed package on how you do. It's more like a design concept on how you'll be organizing your code. And there are many tools available that can be used on for monorepo. Yeah, and I think that's it. So questions from anyone?
I do have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I was just trying to visualize how a monorepo works. Like, for example, I have a main repo on GitHub. Let's call it main, for instance. And inside this main repo, I have two other projects, for example, Service A and Service B.
Mm-hmm.
And those two services are two separated projects created with Maven, for example.
Mm-hmm.
This would be an example of monorepo.
Yeah, it's kind of, you have one repository which you can call a main, can call source or whatever. But it's kind of the project A will be on one directory on the repository. Project B will be another. It will be in a different directory, and then you have a reference, a direct reference between source code. If I wanna, let me see if I can see an example here. Build. Let me, I'll share another tab here. Let me see if this looks okay. I'll have to, okay, so I was working on with Bazel. What happened is usually you have a build.bazel file on each directory. Those build.bazel, they represent one buildable package, okay? And inside the build, you would declare what are the directories references that you have. I can try to find some example reference. Okay, Bazel. Build files. Okay, I'm trying to find examples. I'm not being able to find, but let me. It's kind of they use this kind of build file to declare. It's specifically for Bazel. You have a file declaring what's your target name, what files are part of the build if you have any exclusion, and what dependencies you have for this for your project. Because by declaring the dependencies, it's where the build system will be using to detect what I need to build as well, what I can try to search for pre-built binaries, and in case of tests, like if I change my source code and I have some test referencing the code, the code that I changed, that's how the build system would be able to detect the changes.
Okay, I got it.
I have a question that might be related to Jose's question.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen a monorepo before. So once you build the solution, you build all the services. You build all of it, or you build individually. You have a Maven file for each one of them.
No, the idea is to be able to build them separately, because like building everything, it will become too much time consuming. So all those build tools that like I wasn't using neither Maven or Gradle in this build system. I was using Bazel, which is the Google one that they have been investing. And the purpose was exactly to be able to like, I want to build the project that is in this directory. And when you request this build, it will build your project. If you don't have any changes on your dependencies, it will try to download the pre-built binary. If there is changes on your dependencies, then it has to build locally. So it doesn't try to build everything in your machine, because that for like large scale projects, that's almost impossible. So it needs to be optimized to understand, hey, I'm building this, what do I need to build? What do I need to test? What has been changed?
And when we're talking about a CI/CD process, because we used to have on the project we work, we used to have a kind of a monorepo structure. We work with Java.
Mm-hmm.
So we had multiple microservices on the same repository. And
Mm-hmm.
the problem we had, it's mainly that to launch the pipeline, it took hours. Probably because of the costs
Mm-hmm.
of the machine, but is this supposed to happen? Or do you think that increasing costs will pay for the benefits?
Yeah. So I was working as an engineer. The time of building, what happened there? Usually it depends on the impact of the changes I was making. When I was making a change that didn't impact any other team's test or build, it was only like my deployable code, it could be something simple. Sometimes it would take like 10 to 20 minutes. But there were times when the change impact a lot of other teams and the build run for hours, like 3 hours. So, in the sense, we are always trying to be more caution about the managing of packages. Like my project, although it was kind of one library, we used to break it down into smaller pieces that could be referenced without the whole package. Like we are using one communication protocol called Thrift. It's very similar to protocol buffers, okay, where you declare one file you have one file to declare the message structure, and then the services will communicate using that structure. So what happens? The package that we have for the free definition, we were exposing as a separate referenceable package that didn't need the whole system, because like if someone is referencing my microservice, they would reference this Thrift file only and not entire microservice. And my microservice would also reference the same Thrift file because I need to expose the service with that definition. So what happens? If I change only my server, I'm not changing the contract. So the test that I need to run, it's only my tests. However, if I change my Thrift definition, which changes the protocol that I'm following, now I have to run. I have to rebuild my system. I have to run the test from my system. This might impact another someone that is referencing me. If there's a breaking change on the contract, I will need to fix this other team's project. And probably this kind of change, when I'm changing the Thrift file, it has bigger consequences. So whenever I was changing this contract between services and trying to create a pull request, the build would take much longer compared to when I was changing only the code that impacts only my service. But that's kind of those building tools for Monorepo. They are usually able to detect in a change set what has been impacted by this change set. But also comes down for the people designing the packaging in a Monorepo to be able to break them down into kind of smaller pieces that can be referenced, because you don't want to expose everything about your project in a single package, because then every change that you make might impact someone. If you break down into smaller pieces, you would be able to make one change here, and then someone that doesn't reference that small piece that you changed, only reference other pieces of your project, they wouldn't be impacted. So also you probably need to be a little bit careful on how you're organizing the packaging of your deployables.
Okay.
Not sure if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. I've never seen anything like that before. So it's
Yeah.
more like a abstract concept for me, but it made
Mhm.
it very clear. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
If there's time, I would like to ask another question
Mhm.
about the pull request, for example. As a developer, you are allowed to change other teams' code, for
Mhm.
example.
Yeah.
But the pull request is going to go to specific persons.
Mhm.
These Monorepo tools manages which folder pull request should go to which
Mhm.
person.
Yeah. In the context I was working on, they had a tool for doing the code reviews. I didn't want to mention this tool here. It's called Fabricator. It was created by Facebook. The reason I didn't want to mention on the presentation is because Facebook decided to discontinue the development of Fabricator. but it was able, like, on the directory, you would have one file declaring the owners of that directory forward, and then it would have a concept of knowing what's the owning teams of each of the folders inside the Monorepo structure. So I was able to create pull requests changing anything there. Okay. However, I would always need one person that had been declared as the owner, that was part of the team that owns that code, to go there and approve the pull request I created. So it's kind of, I'm able to create a pull request, okay, there is no problem, but to really commit the code into the main branch, it's another story. I need to gather approval for all the things that got impacted. They need to give me approval, and after everyone approve, then only then I would be able to merge the code to the main branch.
Okay.
At least that's how it worked in the environment I worked on.
And this person would be notified, like,
Yes.
there's a new
Yes.
PR that you need to approve, like.
Yeah. Yes. Sometimes the teams, some teams that I worked on, they were more proactive. Like, if they saw that I created one pull request impact their code, they would go there and do a code review. Some other teams, I would need to poke someone and ask, hey, can you take a look at my pull request? It depended on the team.
Okay, thank you.